All right. I suggest we respect everybody's time and start. This webinar is being recorded for the sake of privacy, compliance, and future viewers. So thank you very much, everybody with us and everybody who are going to watch this webinar in the future. It's going to be recorded. This webinar, and I'm going to get people through along the way. This webinar is dealing with legal tech in the Middle East, trends, future, and access to justice. And it's being held by ELTA. For those of us that doesn't know what ELTA is the European Legal Tech Association, and its main objective is to strengthen the legal industry, legal tech at the European level. And during recent years, all across the world, currently, ELTA has more than 30 countries, representatives and ambassadors from over 30 countries. And all of them are involved in social and other ways of debating in order to speak up about legal technology, how to push it forward, how to make it relevant, and how to make people understand that what the legal industry has been up until recent years is changing, and we just discussed this, it's changing by leaps and bounds and really creating something completely different. I'm going to represent our speakers really in short, because each one is going to represent himself. Suzanna is coming from the United Arab Emirates. She's co-founder and CEO and legal advice Middle East. We have Christiana, founder and CEO of the hybrid LawTech firm coming from Cyprus. Ebru Metin, founder of the legal design in Turkey, and the man is afterwards, as being polite, Mohamed Gomaa, a judge in the Ministry of Justice for Egypt, and myself, I'm Zohar, I'm founder of Tech&Law Israel, which is part of the Robus consulting group. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining in. And the reason that we chose to speak about legal tech in the Middle East is about the impact and the impact of access to this region. And not just that, we wanted to put a bit of emphasis on access to justice. There are so many webinars and discussions about AI and big data and how to take the information and change it and transparent it. But access to justice is the bottom line, is how real people, and not just the mega law firms, the Magic Circle, the 100 AM law firms, are going to actually touch the legal field and really use it through technological manners. So I think that the first question, and goes for all of you, can you please elaborate a bit about what's the status of legal tech in your own country and what opportunities or obstacles your country has with regard to legal technology? Who is the first who wants to take a shot? Mohamed, you smiled. You start.
All right. Thank you so much, Zohar and ELTA, for organizing such great event, and also for giving me a chance to be a part of such an impressive team of panelists. My name is Mohamed Gomaa, and I'm working as a judge at the Egyptian Court of Appeal. Also, I'm an ELTA ambassador representing Egypt, and also I'm a member of the CIArb Young YMG committee.
Sorry, can you tell a bit about what's going on in Egypt with regard to legal technology? What are the opportunities and obstacles? What's the current status of legal tech in Egypt?
Okay, I can mention that Egypt, like many countries in Africa and the Middle East, suffers during the pandemic time because the weak infrastructure of technology in the Egyptian courts. And I can say that many of the Egyptian courts closed its doors in front of the citizens, litigants in Egypt. So the state started working on that, and because we found that we have a problem in this regard. So I can give you some updates about the situation here in Egypt, and I also can give you update about the situation in Lebanon and in Iraq, if this is possible. First, regarding Egypt, I can mention that the Minister of Justice here in Egypt, in cooperation with the Ministry of Communication, has taken great steps in digital transformation within what's called Egypt Digital Justice Project, through establishing a technological infrastructure in 7 courts of first instance in Cairo, so that people can file a lawsuit remotely and pay the fees through electronic way and via the Digital Egypt portal. And also they can know the dates of the court sessions online, and in order to view the decision issued without the need to go to the courts in person, except in case of necessity. Also, the Ministry of Justice circulated a remote detention renewal project in criminal cases to all Cairo and Alexandria courts, based on linking courts to prisons through screens. In addition to the e-notary services for lands and other notary services, it becomes most of notary service electronic one. And finally, a service for receiving complaints and reports to the public prosecution in criminal matters, and establishing also additional offices at the family prosecution courts. Regarding the situation in Lebanon, I can mention that the informatics center at the Ministry of Justice is one of the most important projects that worked on in cooperation with the Ministry of State for Administrative Development Affairs. This project is mainly to automating the courts in 2004, which was entrusted to a Greek company in 2007, in order to complete the general plan for the development of information technology system in Lebanon. The project mainly aims to automate the court's e-archive of data following the progress of the case, e-notification, exhausting information documents using electronic signature, and preparing statistical data analysis and reports electronically. In 2010, the Ministry of Justice in Lebanon obtained a grant from the European Union to implement the first phase of such project, and the company has completed its work or its first stage of this project entirely. However, the second phase of the project was greatly delayed due to the ongoing strikes of employees, the corona pandemic, and now it is stopped, unfortunately.
So we see a lot of progress in the territory. Can you tell us about the obstacles in Egypt? What are the obstacles for legal tech companies currently, legal tech sphere?
I can mention that the main obstacles here in Egypt is that the amount which is sacrificing for the legal tech in the budget. If we will give an example, in the Egyptian Ministry of Justice budget, you can say that the most of the budget is spent on the salaries, about 67% on the salaries. However, we find that only 6% is spent for the legal tech. And we here in Egypt, I see that the situation is should be improved, because we are spend only money on the infrastructure, the tech infrastructure, but don't care about the training. This training should be worked in parallel with the building the tech infrastructure in Egyptian courts, because there are many of the employees here face a difficult in using the new techniques. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Ebru, can you tell us a bit about what's going on and what's the legal tech status in Turkey?
Of course, I'm happy to do so. So I'm Ebru, founder of Legal Design Turkey. I have my focus both on legal design and legal tech. And as a Turkish ambassador, I'm very happy to be here today. So the Turkish legal tech market is quite small. I just checked an article that I wrote for CE blog, the current state of legal tech in Turkey that I wrote in 2021. And I can easily say that there isn't a very big change, like an extraordinary change within these 2 years. And I think it is because of the legislation, attorneyship legislation that prohibits lawyers from certain commercial activities, and also the marketing regulations. These are the two issues that really limits the entrepreneurship in the legal tech market. And what we see from around like maybe 40-45 legal tech companies is that legal tech companies or software companies who provide legal tech solutions, is that the main aim of these tools, legal tech products, is to support the lawyers. So we don't have any legal tech products that completely takes out the lawyer from the equation. And regarding access to justice, what I can say is that and legal tech, that there are some initiatives among lawyers that they build communities and they try to solve legal problems through especially social initiatives, but they didn't start as a like a legal tech solution. We are at the beginning, as far as I can say.
Just as an example, how many legal tech companies around are working in Turkey?
So in 2021, I made an analysis of 38 companies, and I know that there are like 4 or 5 that started in the past 2 years. So most probably they are now around 40 to 45.
Interesting. All right. Thank you very much. Christiana, can you shed some light on what's going on in Cyprus?
Of course, yes. So I'm Christiana, as Zohar said. I'm the founder and CEO of the hybrid LawTech firm. In the legal practice for 26 years now, more than half of which I deal with exclusively with tech. More than half of which. So also the president of the technology committee of the Cyprus Bar Association. Talking of Cyprus, you need to have in mind that we're talking about around 1 million people population, first of all. Secondly, Cyprus, geographically speaking, belongs to the Middle East. But regulatory-wise, Cyprus, as you know, is part of Europe, is an EU country. Therefore, I would dare to say that Cyprus, comparing to other Middle East countries, is ahead in terms of legal tech. So of course, coronavirus accelerated digitalization or digitization, whatever we call that, in Cyprus, as it did everywhere. So during the last 3 years, not only we saw remote working, which of course presupposes the use of digital tools, and we all know about those tools, but in Cyprus, we saw the use of real legal tech. It's difficult, of course, to differentiate, to put a line, I would say, between reg tech and legal tech. But almost 3 years ago, when I joined ELTA as an ambassador, I undertook this research in Cyprus to set up, to construct this document with all the legal tech companies in Cyprus. So this is at least 6 months ago, we had a list of less than a dozen, less than 12 legal tech tools, which is a lot for 1 million people, as you understand. if we discuss this in terms, if we show this in terms of percentage. So we get to see in Cyprus legal firms using legal tech without though labeling it as such. So maybe they call it RegTech, but as we saw during our research, it's both. Most of the RegTech tools, most of the tools called RegTech, they integrate legal tech. So what we see is like a number of law firms have incorporated a chat function on their website to enhance, let's say, client experience, and have developed applications internally for their clients to connect with them, view details on their matters, their cases, manage invoices, and be informed about upcoming events. We now see lots of law firms integrating digital signatures, digital seals, digital timestamps, digital delivery of documents, and even website authentications. So they know, the client knows with which law firm they deal with and actually who they pay when they pay. So a great number of firms have adopted practice management tools. This is true, and we have lots. I mean, most of from the 12 legal tech tools that we have currently in Cyprus, Cyprus-based legal tools, almost all of them deal with practice management and document management. Of course, these, as we see, they can be customized to Cypriot law and also other either Middle East countries' laws or EU laws. But what is the most important thing about Cyprus, and this is the last thing I'm sharing with you, during the last 3 years, is that we got, as Mohamed said regarding Egypt, we got constructed and launched our iJustice system. So as Mohamed said about Egypt, is almost the same. We don't get to have hearings with the use of iJustice, but we do file all documents we need to file, and also pay the necessary stamps and lawyers' fees and everything. And also we get replies from courts, and also we can upload evidence. So that's awesome that we got to have this.
Super interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Suzanna, what's going on in the Emirates?
Well, to add on to what was mentioned, I'll just have to say that probably similar to, like, we are talking about Middle East. Middle East in general is quite a small location. We split the difference here and there, but other than that, it's just one sort of financial ecosystem. Obviously, like low investment rates. So people are investing in businesses that are more clear to them, law being really on the basis where like only lawyers understand it, or only those who are in business somehow can, relate and understand how, big business can be and what to invest in. At the same time, there is no data available to understand the market, which creates a lot of barriers for investors to just understand the market. At the same time, within, like, for example, Ebru mentioned that more products that we are currently having on the market are lawyer oriented, and that's exactly for that reason, just because lawyers can pay, and this is where the business, is sort of thriving. So we are trying to build the products for specific law firms because they will be the ones who are going to pay for it, and we know that this will be a good business scenario. Whereas in other jurisdictions, like for example, my platform, it's a client-oriented platform. It's an access to justice platform where everyone can ask questions to lawyers and they can get a response. And we are solving the problem of what I want to mention. The next issue is the language barrier, right? Most of the people, like 4 countries where foreigners constitute the majority of the population, are in the Middle East, and we are not serving those people quite good because, again, all the legislation in the UAE, for example, are made in Arabic. And if you want to understand your law, grounds and what your legal rights are, you would have to go through either translation or get the lawyer to just explain to you what that means. So again, this is one of the barriers that our market, unfortunately, historically is encountered. At the same time, what is the good side of it? Our market is interested in the slow adoption of new things, but at the same time, we have the highest rate of internet and smartphone penetrations, which gives us the opportunity to just jump stages. What happens, for example, in China, they had the actual paper money, and then they jump into the digital payment, skipping completely the card stage, right? So I think what have happened during the COVID stage is where our government sort of, jumped a couple of stages up. So they skipped the part where they just adopt the CIArb system and just tried filing all the things digitally. They completely gone to an e-courts and all of the other things. So maybe this is the way forward, and maybe because, again, this region is being, at least the UAE for now, in this uncertain, really crazy world, is becoming a hub for a lot of businesses. And this is where it can, again, bring all of the investments in. This is where we can also sort of look into jumping a couple of stages forward and just having more legal tech solutions that are adjusted and twisted specifically for the Middle East. Because a lot of the tools that we are using as lawyers are actually, they were not built for the Middle East. They're not so, flexible that we can twist them so much that they will be just, focused on our market. But in the same time, again, the language, most of the tools we have are in English. We need something more tailor-made for the Middle East, and this only comes with good financial investments.
Thank you very much. Absolutely, it really reminds me of what's going on in Israel, because all of you divided before and after COVID. Before COVID, there was a slow incline of the number of legal tech startups in Israel. Israel is also called the startup nation. So we got quite a few, we got close to 35, 40. And during COVID, when so many entrepreneurs sat at home and said, all right, we're all digital now, let's jump on the legal tech train. And currently there's an explosion of the number of legal tech companies coming out of Israel. But as Suzanna, as you said, because there is a gap between what the government is bringing to the table and about what the private sector is bringing to the table. So unfortunately, the vast majority of the Israeli legal tech companies are aiming abroad to the EU, to the US, and not necessarily internally, which brings us to the second issue of today's webinar, which is access to justice. And let's start with Ebru. Everything to do with access to justice started as a greenwash word, followed, it became a buzzword. And I might say that in the past 2 years, it's actually starting to bring access to justice to different countries and different populations. Can you tell us about how technology improved access to justice in the Middle East and in Turkey? And maybe you can give us a specific tool which was effective, and you can tell about how it assisted the Turkey population?
Of course. So in our case, I can say that, as I mentioned earlier, we have tools that are usually supporting lawyers. So we don't have any legal tech tools that are aimed at the people or lay people as users. So I cannot give you one specific example regarding this, but there is an interesting development that happened during after the earthquakes in Turkey. There were huge earthquakes, and then one of the issues was the collecting evidence. So if a lawyer actually initiated this initiative and created an app together with his colleagues. It is called Debris Removal App. It is not directly a legal tech app, but it functions as it is, because where you can take pictures of the debris and then collect it as evidence, and then later on present this as, to the courts. So it functions as a legal tech tool. It not a legal tech tool that maybe we would easily imagine, but it's really affected how people can access to justice, especially the earthquake survivors. regarding the damage that they received. And one other thing that I would like to say is that we have the presence of United Nations Development Program, the other offices that they have, and they have a lot of activities regarding rule of law within Turkey. But these initiatives, they are not very technology focused at the moment. They are more on providing the best solutions that they can give to lay people. So maybe in future we will start seeing a bit more technology involvement, and then maybe the legal tech tools for access to justice that we can see in near future.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Mohamed, same question for you. Can you give us a demonstration about access to justice in your region, and maybe one tool? It's funny because usually the access to justice tools are so simple. We're all the time thinking about AI and big data. It's usually very simple tools that can assist the population. Yeah.
Sometimes it's not even a tool.
Okay. Once we talk about access to justice, we should mention that we have two relations, justice to justice relation and justice to citizens relation. So once we talk about access to justice, it's the second type of relation, which is justice to citizens. Because if you wanted to measure how people are satisfied from the using of legal tech, first of all, we should know what they need, what the perspectives of the actors in the field, in the legal field and in the judicial field. So I can mention here a survey that done in 2021, conducted by HEAL in over 16 countries, including the Middle East countries, show on average that only 33% of people are able to completely resolve their justice problem. 11% of people are able to partially resolve them, while 31% have an ongoing justice problem. And unfortunately, 22% find no resolution. This survey shows us that we face a problem in the Middle East. One of those problems that we don't take in our consideration the marginalized people and also the incapable ones. As Suzanna mentioned, also the language problem is one of the main obstacles in transformation to legal tech in our legal and judicial products. Because here we should find suitable tools which help or ease the use of this technology. So here in Egypt, we are working in the project of justice on that. We are working to not forget the marginalized people, the people live in rural places, and also the incapable people and the foreigners live in Egypt. All of this are taken into the Egyptian project of transformation to tech or adopting technology in legal service and justice service.
Interesting. Suzanna, you started saying something about the tool.
Yeah, it's just a small comment. In general, when I started working in access to justice area, I was assuming the same as many people that it should be a tool, the tech that is a solution for this. But for most of the time, it's just the change of procedure and sort of the way we look at the issue. And legal design helps to solve a lot of problems at times, and it's not tech, right? So for example, comic contracts that help illiterate people understand their contracts and legal things that they're signing. Some buttons that people in villages in Uganda can use when they are attacked by someone and they need legal help. It's the physical stuff that can work. It's sometimes the alteration of the way we used to do things in order to help those who cannot use them the same way. So DIY law in Nigeria, for example, it just created a space for people to come in and bring the templates that they're helping them fill them up in order for people to have some paperwork in hands, because for most part, the issue is that people don't have any, right? So if you look into the problem from the perspective of like, we have this problem and then look into wider solution spectrum. Sometimes there are solutions that I saw that have been built for locations that, for example, it's an app that have been built for people to solve a particular issue. But then when we look at the geographics, we see that people are not using mobile phones that can accept this app. It's just the buttons, old-fashioned phones. So how do you, and again, it's just unfair that you've created something, but it's not serving any good. So it's just looking at things from the perspective of the problem, rather than running with the solution to it.
All right, so thank you very much. It's a very, let's call it fresh perspective about access to justice. I see a lot of companies and also law firms that are using the phrasing access to justice, and they're looking at it as if it's just sort of a pro bono thing. And
yeah.
people
That's
are
another issue.
a lot of the time are misleading or just taking it in the wrong perspective, because there is a lot of money to be made in the access to justice arena. Christiana, if we're looking to access and justice from your perspective and from the region you're coming from, how can legal tech be used to support and empower what we've been discussing up until now, marginalized communities, and promote greater social justice in the region?
Yeah, thank you very much, Zohar, for this question. This is a matter we should pay deep attention at and considerations. Such questions have data at the core of their answers. So as I was going through, like the other day, of a report by the World Economic Forum on the matter of marginalized groups, and not only racialized groups as well. Of course, tech needs to focus on the needs of marginalized groups and racialized groups in order to support them and empower them and promote greater social justice and protect their human rights in the region. But the issue is what's the correct way to do it? We need to consider the needs of marginalized groups, societies, when designing and when implementing legal tech. Therefore, certain education needs to be there at that exact point. Like, subjects like the economic of laws, like human rights, like the philosophy of law, jurisprudence. These are core subjects, should be considered even in the law schools for people who are designing legal tech. And it is true that same sets of facts can affect different groups of people in many different ways. So when designing and evaluating legal tech, assuming that that there's a standard human, as it is mentioned in the report, assuming that there's a standard human, as we always say, a reasonable person when we deal with cases, assuming there's a standard human or standard community member or a standard group member is absolutely wrong. We shouldn't do that. And let's take the examples given in this report. They mentioned punishment and policing area. And we see tools in this area, like AI, algorithmically driven tools, where we get to see the use of facial recognition technologies, which use these data, which are historical data and real-time data, to predict when and where a crime is most likely to occur, or who is most likely to do it? I mean, who is most likely to engage in this crime or become a victim of criminal activity? In fact, research into this matter has repeatedly proved that the police data, that is why I said the answer, at the core of each answer, we find data. So police data that feeds into predictive policing programs is considered to be historically biased and perpetuates, as the report, if I remember correctly, as a report says, it perpetuates over policing of racialized and marginalized groups. And there are other tools as well, like this Dutch, in Europe, we see this Dutch tool called CIArb, the CIArb system, which is a pre-crime detection system. This is used to determine whether or not individuals were likely to commit public benefit fraud. This system was rolled out in neighborhoods with low income and high immigration rates. And then suddenly the court said, this is illegal, they said. But then the Dutch government ignored the court, and they are not only doing it, but they are enhancing it. And instead of CIArb, now we're getting super CIArb. So there's another example as well. Automated systems are being used in immigration context, where they interfere with the rights of refugees and migrants and stateless or countryless persons. So I'm sure you heard about these border control systems integrating AI in the form, again, as I mentioned before, of facial recognition systems, retinal, and fingerprints, scans, and biometrics, and even surveillance drones and stuff. This is how they gather the data of these marginalized groups. And as it seems that there's a large scale reliance on these technologies, but where does this take us? It takes us that as a result, we see that human bodies into evidence is reduced. They are reduced. So, what happened now? In an effort to regain some control over their bodies and over their personal data, that report said, I mean, it's unimaginable, guys. That report said that these refugees, migrants, they even burn their own fingerprints. Can you imagine that? They are forced to do that. I mean, it's unbelievable. So it's obvious that the refugees in this case are treated as too untrust. Is this fair? No, they're treated as too untrust or not worthy to get information from them. Like they don't trust them. They're not worthy. I don't want to get any information from them, and they never get their consent. So just to close this, of course, LegalTech would be able to support, as I described before, the way it should be done is, ab initio, at the design.
Christiana, thank you very much. I think there's been a long time since I heard such a heated answer coming from.
I like this area of marginalized groups and racialized groups very much.
Anyone can see that, absolutely. I think that it's a very important topic. Ebru, if you can shed some light about it, once again, marginalized communities and how to promote social justice through legal technology.
So what I can say in this area about in Turkey, we see that there aren't many legal tech tools that actually helps different groups of people. So it's the main purpose of these tools are for lawyers and like how they can work more effectively. But through the legal design lens that I can say with regard to a project that we did together with UNDP Turkey, is that they have specific needs. So we need to have a different approach when it comes to marginalized groups or disadvantaged groups. And this there is this new approach that is called, not very new, but maybe new to the Turkish community, people-centered justice, and it's a rule of law programming again. And this approach it's a little bit different than legal design because it's more practiced by the big organizations, as I mentioned earlier, like UN or OECD or other organizations. And with regard to this approach, they try to understand first the needs of these groups through, for example, people's needs surveys or the other methods that they use. So technology is not directly, as far as I know, used. And as maybe like a simple example that I can give, during the project, we interviewed several women's rights based organizations, and one of them was specifically working with migrant women and refugees. And they told us that they have trouble using the cell phones even. Like if they have one, they have the troubles, and they, instead of using it like reading material or seeking information like in written, they prefer to send voice messages to these organizations. So the needs are the most important part, and I think when working with disadvantaged groups, people-centered justice programming, rule of law programming is a good way to start. So I wouldn't propose to say, like, maybe from the Turkey case, that maybe technology is not a start, but it can also only be a tool after making these surveys and understand their needs and find the right solutions or create the right solutions.
Yeah, it's all about creating access. And here in Israel, a few good years ago, there's a project, it's called Digital Israel, which is taking most of the government offices and trying to modernize them and provide digital information throughout all channels and almost each and everything you need to do with the government. And COVID put a lot of resources into the Digital Israel project. And the funny thing is, which brings us to our next topic about adoption of technology, is that for people who doesn't know how to work with it, there is a lot of explanation within the internet. All you have to go is go www.something. And then they said, listen, there are a lot of people who doesn't know how to use the internet, not because they're not intelligent, not because just because they're older than the rest of the population. So there's no ending to that. Suzanna, let's go with you about adoption, because we're speaking about taking technology and evolving and resources. But I think one of the main challenges is the adoption of legal technology in the Middle East. And it's not necessarily a Middle East problem, but it seems that the adoption of legal tech in our region is a bit more, let's call it hectic.
Yeah, well, I can say that I worked for a year with DLA Piper, and their reach and the size of the firm and their clients are quite wider than the Middle East. And I can say that everywhere in every legal department we work with, we struggle with the adoption. And to my sort of perspective on how I work with legal departments, it's because legal technology is something that will put on them, on lawyers. It's like a burden that they have to go through, and they're afraid of it and they don't know what it is. And so when I started working, I created my own sort of adoption system, when it's like a stage system, when you break the big part into a smaller one and just embed it within the work frame. Sometimes it's as simple as like you look at how the person does their work and then just try to embed, like you cannot copy paste here. You can just click one button and it will be just sent into the right portion of it. Then I had a lot of discussions with lawyers as to like privacy of the information, security of the information, the backups, and all of the stuff related to securing the, sharing of the data and files. So a lot of it has to do with the age, as you just rightly mentioned before. Our profession is a very backwards looking profession. We were tend to learn how to take the information from the book, implement it in life, and not look any further. So what happens right now is the shift of the profession overall, and also having like 60% of lawyers being over, 50 years, 60 years old, right? So those are the actual stats from ABA, American Bar Association data. And we are dealing with people that sort of see their career in the next couple of years when they finish and they go to, happy, prosperous relaxation phase. And they're lawyers, that they just come from the university. They're all eager to learn and implement new stuff. And this is just a clash inside the firm. And so it's good when you have the right mentorship on the senior level that can support the growth and transformation and actually create the plan. Because most of the time, especially here in the Middle East, what I saw, it's very hectical. Like people are finding some tool, they've heard it about it somewhere, or someone suggested, or they saw it with the other firm, and they just start implementation phase straight away. They're not looking into other tools, they're not comparing them, they're not actually mapping out their own processes and what they're doing and how it will help in their particular case. And this is where, again, we have a lot of very fancy tools that, charge a lot of money, and then people are not using them. When I start, I actually look into the use of Microsoft Suite. Like sometimes majority of the tools that are available to us with the current subscriptions are not being properly used. They're not called legal tech, but they can be used as tech, of the sort. It can solve the problem. And so looking into like the stage approach where you map out your processes, understand where the major flows are, like what is the, big, really small, big in the way that it's just will change the way things work, but in the same time, it's small and easy fix. And then, just go from there. Because when people start seeing in a law firm that it actually works, or it evolves the problem that they're working with to a different stage, then they are not so, confronted with this, tech and transformation phase. So yeah, I've seen a lot of backlash from lawyers on the adoption phase, but sort of having been communicating with them for quite a while, I understand where they're coming from, and it's about our approach on how we do things and how we actually find the right tools for the right problems as well. Again, where the legal design sprints can help.
That's a very fascinating answer. Mohamed, if you can share with us about adoption of legal technology in your region, what obstacles you're facing?
Yes, I think Suzanna speak about the private sector very well. So I will talk about the governmental sector or public sector. How to adopt or improve the adoption of legal tech in the Middle East. I can mention that we should work on the 3 dimensions: legislative, executive, and also the judicial one at the same time. Cooperation is very, very important at the first stage to ensure that we will not leave anyone behind us, especially marginalized, as we mentioned. Also, on the other side, we should take into our account, whether in private sector or in public sector, that not only the legal tech adoption of the legal tech only will improve the performance. We should also take other factors which could affect indirectly on the performance. For example, if we talk about the justice services, so the technology is one of the factor, is one of the variables, but also we should take into our account the budget, the amount of budget sacrifices, the number of judges in the court, also the disposition time, how the case is difficult, how the type of the cases, and also I mean there's many factors which could affect indirectly on the performance and directly on the technology at the same time. So all of those factors are important in adoption and or in improving the adoption of the legal tech in Egypt and also in the Middle East.
Fascinating. It just makes me want to visit Egypt. We are in the last 5 minutes of our fascinating webinar, and a question to all of our panels. We end always with a look into the future. How do you see legal tech evolving in our area, in the Middle East, in the upcoming years? If there are any investors looking at us or entrepreneurs looking, where they should put their resources / intelligence / money? Who is jumping and wants to be a prophet?
Can I add something on what Mohamed said before we go on? I mean, in terms of governmental, because I deal a lot with policy, I'm involved with policy and regulation, and what I see about governments and the role they play, and you know, when you get a role, you either you play it productively, or sometimes, although you do have a role, you fail at playing in the role, or you do not play it at all. So what they need to do is, if we want to see adoption and then have future, because the question was about the future Zohar just posed, what we need to do, in my humble opinion, is to enable the governments through education, enable the governments to lift the barriers of all types. The barriers need to be lifted. Unless the governments address most of the obstacles, the barriers, they will not see, they won't be able to promote the adoption, and they will not have any future. So as I was going through last week, as I was going through an article, it said that these barriers are grouped into 3 categories. And they said these are technical and non-technical barriers, institutional barriers, and organizational barriers. And then they grouped them in the following way. They said, we do get 6 different barrier groups, they said: legal foundations, technical infrastructure, cost-benefit relationships, innovativeness, legitimacy, and policy coherence. So this is what I wanted to say, together with pre-adoption attitude. This is the solution. The government should customize their attitude, and we need to see that pre-adoption in order to see adoption. Absolutely. And I agree with Suzanna about early detection. It's absolutely vital and crucial. Thank you very much.
No, absolutely, and I think we all see that in our perspective countries and others, that governments are pushing forward slowly but surely, or too fast, but they are pushing forward. Future legal tech. We're in this last question and last answer. Who would like to give a risk? Suzanna, you look like a risk taker to me.
Oh, I love this question. We always brag about the future, right? Let's open the coffee mugs and start. Well, I just think that because we have a lot of separated solutions, like standalone solutions, I think we would have to come to something more sort of along the lines of connecting those things into like an ecosystem. And I should say that probably we will see more of platforms that are you know, the apps that are integrated with Microsoft Suite, the apps that works more with the iManage or other platforms that we currently already have in the ecosystem, right? Something that will be manageable, not standalone, not yet another app that we have to go and look for stuff. Probably we will see more investments, but just because we are going into, like a lot of people saying that we are going into recession, like a global one, probably not that big of investment that it was before the COVID era, but there will be some investments that will help quite good to just lift the quality of the current state of small and medium law firms, not the big one, because the big one already have a lot of the things and the tools and the people that help them do a lot of big projects. But at the same time, small and medium firms are lacking support. And so I think that a lot of the investment should go that way. And access to justice. If we can actually focus investors on investing in not in a business idea that will bring you millions, but in some platforms that will actually solve access to justice issues and will bring people from, and again, I looked it up, the new stats are saying that it's 1.5 billion people who cannot obtain justice.
Wow.
So it's just a big market in and of itself. So maybe there are some solutions that doesn't look like interesting financial wise initially, may looks like it when we go, you know, through a certain stage and develop it to a certain point. So yeah, that's my predictions.
That's a very good prediction. It's a very good answer to the.
Let's see, let's catch up in a year and see where it actually went.
To
Yes.
finance this webinar. The webinar dealt with legal tech in the Middle East, trends, access to justice, and future. And Suzanna just answered about the future. I wish to thank you all for taking part. Thank you very much. It's always funny because all the time we think, how can we going to squeeze in an hour? And an hour went just like that. If any one of you have any questions, all of our details, contact details are on the website, of course, and on LinkedIn. Each one of the participants will be more than happy to continue the dialogue afterwards. And if any of the viewers thought that the Middle East is an interesting area before this webinar, I'm sure you're thinking it's a much interesting region in the world afterwards. I wish to warmly thank Christina, Mohamed, Suzanna, and Ebru for participating and joining in. Thank you for ELTA for hosting us.
Thank you too.
And shalom, ilalika, goodbye,
Thank you,
and
Zohar.
see you all in the next webinar.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
you,
See
everyone.
you all.
Thank you
very
Bye.
much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.